All right. Hello everyone. Welcome to the 2025 February 22 meeting for sig-auth. Let's kick it off. We have a lot of agenda items. Nothing in this section, so let's start with Mo.
Yeah, so I had added this to the agenda because we had gotten some emails regarding the state of the hierarchical namespaces project, which I didn't know the state, so I then proceeded to email the
Branch one. We are here.
yes.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, so I emailed the maintainers. Are the maintainers here or the folks who sent the emails are the only ones who are here? Can't remember the name. Hold on. It's like in the owner's file. So there's like a person, I think Adrian from Google, and then yeah,
Yes, it was.
and then there's Ryan. I don't think I see a Ryan on the call, so I don't think the maintainers are here. But um, the gist I got from Ryan is copy pasted here. This is what he had responded back to sort of the state of the project. Um, which is that Adrian, who I think was the original maintainer, has I guess stepped away. Um, yeah, so it's unclear to me sort of the state of this project overall in terms of usage, and certainly I don't think it's had really much in terms of maintenance. Like the last official release was in June of 2023. Um, yeah.
Yes. I just contacted them and we'll say you too through this project because we are going to use it for a French sovereign distribution of Kubernetes and Kubernetes Vanilla. And we were wondering which is how the community is active or not, and if it's possible to be into the maintainers list, because we get some vulnerability. We don't know if this the code, as we want to use it, and as a sovereign distribution, we have to maintain it and to know exactly what the source code is, and also to contribute to the project. That is why I contact you, and that is why we were wondering how we can subscribe to any group to maintain it, and maybe to share some evolution that we can get through our distribution, for example, and so on.
Yeah. During was it you or David that did the initial like intake of this? I don't think it was me because I
It
don't remember.
was not me.
Uh, this is my issue. This is me for this issue. I am a Lynch maniac. This is me. And as Renaud said, we want to reassure ourselves about the sustainability of the project, because we are going to in production with this. It's a very cool future hierarchical namespace. We like it, but we don't see no more commits in them, and we are little shy about this, and we want to know what is the state of the project, and if we can contribute to the project, if we can look at it and add some contribution.
Yeah, I think the perception that the project is largely inactive is probably accurate. So if you're considering whether to start using it in production,
Yes.
I don't know that there are large known deficiencies, but I don't think it is active. What you do with that information you could do a couple things. One is choose not to use it. One is
Yes,
choose to maintain a fork of it yourself. And
exactly.
one is to look to contribute, help maintain it, and eventually possibly become a maintainer of it. So those are sort of the three big possibilities.
We were interested by the third one. We decided to get a maintainer of it through our distribution.
So there is a path, a general path to starting as a contributor, growing to have more responsibility, and eventually becoming a maintainer.
Mhm.
It's a little bit difficult to apply that process to a project which is pretty much inactive and doesn't really have any existing active reviewers, maintainers to help
I totally agree.
mentor and add, help bring new people in. So we don't make a habit of just adding people to committers lists on inactive projects, which I'm
I
sure
know.
you with.
I can understand. That is why I'm here today.
Yep, yep. So we need a little bit of critical mass from the existing folks who had context on the project and had been working on it. I think we should determine, like we as a SIG should determine if we have that critical mass to at least review dependency bumps or review security fixes. If we don't even have that, then we should probably archive the project,
Yes.
and that would clarify your options to not use it or use a fork of it.
Yes, totally. I hope the third solution would be the one that could be possible, because of course, we want to contribute and to maintain it, but we don't have the organization to get all the different security fix to that impact us. The project and us is the project, and that is something that really miss. And I thought that the SIG groups as the organization enough to get this kind of information, because I don't look at every day or every hour the vulnerabilities that is shared, and we are going to maintain it. I think that you get or you already get through your organization of the community the I would say the tools and the people to get this kind of information, and we are going also as maintainer or contributor will share and take the subject to be fixed. You see?
Yeah, so the SIG structure does a couple of things. It organizes projects, and it makes it clear who to reach out to and who has responsibility for different projects. As you move outside of the core projects to these satellite projects in other repos, there's a lot of inconsistency about how much staffing and how much attention is actually being paid. And so it's actually a relatively small number of people actively working on things this SIG is responsible for, and most of that effort goes to the core Kubernetes components and more heavily used external projects like the CSI Secret Manager, I think, is one that has a fair amount of active use and development. So you did the right thing by reaching out to us. So that's good. We need to get clarity on who in the SIG with context on this project is able to devote time to maintaining it and mentoring new interested contributors. And so that's on
Yes.
us to determine and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
That's great.
I want to add to that a question, Jordan, which is, what would we consider our internal bar for, like, I guess maybe the term would be adoption, right? Like I think with like secret CSI, like I think it's an easy no-brainer, right? Like even though we're not necessarily pushing that hard on changing it, we have tons of adoption within the ecosystem from all the like major vendors and all sorts of random private providers that do stuff with it. So I think it's a very safe project, right? Whereas for this one, I don't actually know. Well, I mean, and maybe I'm mistaken,
It's
right? In the sense that maybe someone is using it and they just didn't say anything to us, and
Yeah.
we don't know.
I
I
can
don't know. I sort of use
I
contact
can
point
tell you I can tell
issues, pull requests, questions about it. I use that as a proxy for activity, and I haven't seen much, if anything, here.
Yeah, so I
yes.
guess what I would ask is, even if we have maintainers, right, would we want to have this as an official sig-auth subproject if there isn't necessarily adoption?
If it's out there already, and there are people willing to keep applying security fixes, I'm not going to say no. If we're struggling, if we're trying to find people to do that because we don't have that, then I think usage is a good question. Is it worth trying to recruit people for a project that we don't have any evidence is getting wide usage?
Exactly. But may I explain why we use it through our distribution? It's for would say security reasons in Kubernetes. We use it as a chroot command in OS through for Kubernetes, and we don't offer the cluster administration to users. We offer the namespace as a service distribution. You see, you through this kind of project, we create a new kind of offer of Kubernetes on the market.
Yeah, the motivation behind the project, I think, is pretty well understood. Several of us have experience with offering namespace scoped slices of a cluster to users. I think the question is the controllers or the logic to make that happen. Does it make sense for that to live in a shared project like this? If there's wide usage across multiple consumers, then maybe so, and that would be fine. If it's limited, narrow usage, then maybe it would make more sense for you to maintain the controller that accomplished that
I
yourself.
totally agree. I
Yep.
totally agree. But I think that it's something that the SIG has to do is to communicate on this kind of offers, and maybe to get more people involved to maintain it, and through we'll say commercial offer. You see, that's a way to develop would say the activity around this project.
Yeah, I think getting clarity on the existing maintainers would be a good first step.
Totally.
If we don't have existing maintainers, I think we would probably archive it. Transitioning from no existing maintainers with minimal usage to a new set of maintainers, I think would be difficult. But we will get in touch with the existing maintainers and double check the current state. We should probably time box this to make sure we get to other things on the agenda as well.
Yes, that will be my next question, is when do we get this kind of answer to make us the right decision for our project?
Yeah, we can initiate the questions like today. If we don't have an answer by the next SIG meeting, which is 2 weeks, I think that is the answer. Like,
Yes,
if we can't even get a
if we don't
response,
get the
then
response we want it to
it's
be
paid by
close to the-
itself.
Yep.
I
Okay.
see.
We don't have to answer this now, but I do feel like just this whole discussion, this is why I had put this question on here, is like, feel like maybe we should check on things that we said are our official projects every so often in some way, shape, or form. I don't know what that necessarily looks like, but maybe we don't have to figure it out right now because we don't have that much time.
as long as we
pointing
don't like a new pull the lever annual report process.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe as part of the annual report, we remind ourselves, hey, we own these sub projects. Go email the maintainers to make sure they're still there. So okay.
That's a Regini prob.
Okay. If we don't have anything else, then I guess well, Rita, you're running the meeting. You decide.
Okay, let's go to the next topic.
Yeah, that was by me. I noticed that some of the tests were like creating some service accounts that they weren't using, so I started deleting them. And then noticed that none of the tests were running, and then I kind of asked in sig testing, I think, and they also confirmed that some of the node authenticator tests are like not running in any configuration because like I think a feature was added to those tests, but no CI jobs that fulfill that feature were ever added. So does anybody have like any history of like what happened there or like insights into this?
I have vague memories of Sergey from the Node team trying to untangle how we feature tag tests. And I think the default is that any test, like E2E test, that has a feature tag associated with it is assumed to require like some configuration or some non-default opt-in something. And so if you add a feature tag to your tests, what you're saying is this feature isn't testable in default clusters. So by default, don't run it in CI jobs, which means you're then on the hook to go do whatever setup is required in some CI job and opt into running that test. If the feature that you're testing, I haven't looked at the particular test you pointed at. If the feature you're testing is actually on in the default CI clusters, then maybe you don't need the feature tag. I would have to look at the details of what it was testing to know.
It's
So one
testing like node authenticator, like if the node is able to create a SAR for authentication. SAR
Okay.
and I think it tests both authentication and authorization in that test.
Okay, so that if it's a feature that was in alpha, then it's not on by default. If it's a feature that's made it to beta and doesn't depend on off by default APIs, then maybe if the feature gate is on by default, maybe you could just drop the gate from the test. That I don't love that because I think it's useful to have information associated with the test that says, oh, this test is testing this feature and it's a beta feature. But
oh, so
that's more
one thing
testing, like how do they expect us to use these tags if
so,
every time we use it we have to go like monkey with a bunch of CI jobs?
so one point of confusion that I also had that like Ben clarified was that these features are not a mapping to a feature gate. Feature, it's like an overloaded term here. Like for features, they want like features of the cluster and not like feature gates in the cluster. So like if your test relies on feature gates, then they have other mechanisms where you check if that feature gate is enabled and then run the test. Otherwise, you don't.
Okay, then I don't really understand this.
Yeah,
Tag,
even I ran
tag
into
the
this
test.
because like I just named the feature as my feature gate, thinking that it's some magic in the background that like would map the feature to the feature gate automatically, and like I broke a bunch of CI tests, and like in terms of just this one, I just wanted to call the issue out because like those tests
Yeah.
should be running somewhere, so I can go remove the tag and see what breaks and fix it.
I mean, it's good for us to know. I think it's probably worth an issue for testing to like.
Wait,
It
that
seems
mean
like a
like
really
the
sharp edge
cluster
around
trust
testing
bundle
framework.
stuff is actually broken? Like it's not actually running?
Say that again.
Isn't don't our like the E2Es that Tahir added for cluster trust bundles, don't they have feature tags on them? Like wouldn't they
They
also
have.
not?
So what I had to do is you add a testing tag to the test case, and then you go to a separate repo and you set up a CI configuration that says, I want to run tests that are tagged with this. And then in the configuration, you say, by the way, turn on alpha APIs and this feature gate.
Yeah.
It's in
So
like a SIG testing repo somewhere or test
so
info.
anytime we use this in our tests,
Okay.
additional work is required for the tests to actually run. That's a really sharp edge. Like at least that has to be documented. Ideally, something would like poke you in the pull request to say you're using this. Where's your test job? Or like I don't know. But that I mean that seems like more like a sig testing question about framework documentation and usage and sharp edges. It's good for us to know this as we're adding features. Like make sure the test you wrote is running and link to a run of it somewhere. Don't just assume it's running. That's a good general bit of advice, I guess. So, Nick, for your specific question, maybe try dropping the tag, see if you can see if it's running, see if it's passing. Maybe that'll work for this. But I would follow up with SIG testing and ask them to at least document, maybe improve detection of use of this because it seems like a really sharp edge.
Sounds good. I'll do that.
All right. I'm always suspicious when a big new test gets put in a pull request and everything is green. Did it even run?
The default seems backwards. I feel like you should have to opt out your tests, not opt them in. But oh well.
I mean,
Okay.
even tweaking the way you say this is for this feature, and you have to say like test it by default or don't test it by default. Even making the test author make a choice would maybe be helpful. I don't know. That's for SIG testing to figure out, but silently skipping it is scary. All right, we can go on to the next thing.
All right. Hi, are you on the call to talk about this?
Next one is from me. So yeah, it's a fairly simple one. Basically, we have some use cases where maybe we will store the audit events from multiple different Kubernetes clusters in the same location. And then without any identifier, it is not possible to distinguish which audit event from which Kubernetes cluster came from. So yeah, basically here the proposal is to have an optional feature and add cluster identifier to the audit events.
So I think this has come up in sig-auth before, and we have decided numerous times that individual kube clusters don't have a concept of a cluster ID. Individual API servers do have IDs, but they are not the same. It is intentionally a unique ID for API servers, and there is no concept of a cluster ID.
But even this identifier, it is not reflected anywhere in the audit events today.
Okay.
I think. Not that I think it is. Yeah, I haven't
So,
seen.
like to cluster ID in particular, right? I don't anticipate adding a field for a concept we don't have in the cluster. So if that's what you want, it would need sig-auth to decide that clusters will have IDs and be aware of them.
Yeah, that I think that is a bigger problem that I'm not so fluent with it and I cannot take decisions. But just for the audit events, I think that such identifier could be just some audit flag on the kube API server, and then the Kubernetes installer can set this flag with whatever ID it decides. It will be the same for all replicas for the kube API servers of this cluster, and that's it. Or eventually the individual kube API server identifiers could be used if they share some common prefix that also would do the job, I think. But it is still necessary to also set this identifier in the audit event.
So I think we wouldn't add a first class field to the event type for a concept that the API server doesn't have. If you're looking for a place in the event, the audit event, to sort of decorate with some additional information to identify the server where the event came from, or if you are ingesting audit events from API servers and you have your own idea of a cluster identifier or a cluster name and you want to decorate audit events with that, you could make use of the event annotations field as you ingest things. So the API server writes events to a file or out to an endpoint. When you're ingesting those, you could decorate those with your concept of the server identifier or the cluster identifier if you wanted to. And that would probably be my recommendation for now, but I don't think we would add fields to the audit event type that represent concepts that the API server doesn't have.
I fully understand this, and I know that it is also an option to resolve this problem. My idea here was that for just such augmentation of the audit events it might not be a good idea each cluster owner, whatever it is, to run such proxy that augment the event, because it will require additional security hardening, and it must be ensured that it does not tamper with the audit events. So if it is something more complex, more changes to be made to the events, I'm okay to implement all of this externally to Kubernetes and let it receive the events and do with them whatever it wants. Here I wanted just to double check with you if the Kubernetes community is interested in such feature to uniquely identify the source of the events if they are stored in the same place from multiple.
Yeah, I don't think we would do it narrowly for audit events. If a cluster identifier concept was added generally, then yes, it would make sense for this to be one of the places where that was reflected.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other topics?
I had a quick one about KEP 4601.
Can you add it to the agenda?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. Which KEP is
What?
4601?
It's the field selector, label and field selector for authorization, I think.
Yep.
Yep. That one is
Are we planning to do any support any policies in RBAC for that?
Oh yeah, one day. Give us some time. Not that.
That is not included in the scope for that KEP.
Oh yeah, definitely not.
Adding declarative authorization support for that makes use of these is an obvious possible future work area, but we haven't designed it or committed to it. So
I mean,
there's
Anish and I are
interest,
actually
but
early
it's a little bit
designers, and
complicated, and it's not clear whether we would expand RBAC or do a different API, or we don't know.
Okay.
So I expected kept 4601 to graduate to GA if I think we were staying in beta in 133 to get wider usage. Once we're satisfied that we've exercised it enough, I expect it to graduate to GA without taking on also add to RBAC work.
Agree. But yeah,
Okay,
we
sounds good. Thank you.
right, like a couple of both at KubeCon last year and then like before that, Anish and I had presented some like really early designs that played around with some of this stuff. And then like David and Jordan had some really good feedback, and that's kind of where we're at. Is like we had some discussion, but we didn't like update the APIs based on the feedback or anything like that. That's like how far we got.
That was RBAC++ demo, right? Was that similar or? Okay,
yeah. I mean, so it would be a change of, right? Like there was a bunch of discussion both in the meeting and then on Slack about how we would change the APIs to parameterize them in a way that was easier to reason about.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that would let you do the stuff that you're describing in RBAC, right? If we wanted to pursue that. But like I think that's still really at the pre-KEP phase, right? Like I think there would need to be another iteration of the design with like another POC implementation, then another chat with
like the
Sig.
declarative ++ stuff.
Yeah, and so we would go back and forth and decide if the shape makes sense, and then in there probably would have to decide, is it in RBAC, is it a different API group altogether, or is it a different authorizer altogether, or whatever, right? Like all those pieces would have to be decided, and then we would write a KEP and then actually go implement the real thing.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Oh, and the other thing that when I last spoke to David about this is we were also looking at two other KEPs. One was the generic support for all supporting label and field selectors for all verbs, and so that way that uniformity existed. And then the other one was like conditional authorization via admission, which was basically another change to subject access review that we were considering. I think David, when I spoke with you last, we wanted to try to maybe do those first before we messed with RBAC or any new declarative authorizer thingy. So that way we don't have to then go update it again immediately afterwards because we changed the underlying API.
Yeah, I see that as valuable. I think it could greatly simplify an authorization implementation. And I think that conditional authorization, where you can say yes, but an admission plugin also has to run, is another natural step in the direction of what do authorizers look like in the next several years. So yeah, I'm in favor of both those fundamentals getting created before we try to create a new API.
Yeah, and I think I don't think we want to revamp declarative APIs over and over. Like RBAC has served us really nicely for like last decade, and I think we would want to have whatever the other thing is serve us another good decade instead of having to tweak it every year or two. Cool. Did anybody else have anything? Jordan's feeling old from that. My first son was born when I started working on Cube, right? So I can always tell how long I worked on Cube. It's just
mine too.
That's true, hilarious. Yeah, you had other kids. My first child plus son was born.
Excuse me.
Okay, any other topic? Okay, if not, should we call it? All right, well, thanks everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.